Hi, good morning. This is Richard Chu. I'm co-chair of Shearman Sterling's Technology, Media, and Telecom Practice Group. This morning, I'm very pleased to have with me Alexandra Ross, who's the Senior Global Privacy and Data Security Counsel at AutoDesk and also author of the Privacy Guru Privacy blog. Alexandra, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, Alexandra, why don't we start with maybe telling us a little bit about what you do at AutoDesk and what AutoDesk does, and maybe talk a little bit about some of the privacy issues you face there.
Sure. So I'll start off by the standard disclaimer that I'm more than happy to speak with you today, but I'm speaking on my own behalf, and these are my opinions and not reflective of my employer. So what I do at AutoDesk, I'm the main privacy counsel for a technology company. So AutoDesk is a leader in 3D design, entertainment software. So our flagship product is what's known as AutoCAD. It's a desktop software that's been around for about 30 years, and it's primarily used by architects and designers for 3D designs, architectural designs for buildings. What we're doing at AutoDesk right now, we're somewhat in a transition like a lot of technology companies. So we're moving from a desktop software model to a subscription and cloud-based model. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of privacy issues and data issues. So my work within the company with my team and other legal partners and business partners and security partners is to manage the flow of data from both our customers and our employees, and to manage both the privacy compliance issues as well as the privacy programmatic issues. So developing the privacy program, the framework, compliance, training and awareness, and so forth with our employees.
Tell me a little bit about some of the specific additional privacy nuances that are brought from your transition to being a desktop software to, going to the cloud subscription service.
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting because we're seeing just a lot more data and a lot more end user data. So before, or primarily we were working with account level data, so company level data, and now we're seeing a lot more individual end user data, and also, like a lot of other technology companies, we're looking at a lot of other analytics data. So non-personal, de-identified data, but usage data of how our customers interact with our products so that we can provide better product experiences for our users.
What about one of the big area topics these days is, of course, privacy by design. Is that something you guys try to implement as you've transitioned your products from sort of desktop to subscription, or
yes, definitely. That's always top of mind for us in terms of it's one of the foundational parts of our privacy program is working with our product groups, with our architects and our engineers to embed privacy and security in our products. So like a lot of technology companies, we want to make sure that we engender the trust of our customers. So it's important to us that we follow the privacy by design principles and that we have programs within our companies so that our engineers and our designers of our products and services understand the ramifications of data collection. And to the extent possible, we are creating and designing and implementing privacy and security controls within our products. So it is very important to us, and it's a work in progress. We're continually iterating on both our privacy and our security programs.
One of the things, right before you, I was interviewing Jules Polonetsky, you probably know him from the Center of Privacy Forum, and one of the things he talked about was, kind of what is the definition of personal information, because that's a very big thing. You got to really understand that before you can talk about the privacy of, it's like privacy of what. Tell me a little bit about your experience with how you guys try to define personal information, or where do you sort of see that boundaries, or is that an issue for you guys?
Well, it's an issue for all technology companies, and it's an issue for all companies that are working globally and are collecting information of European users and data from customers outside of the U.S., where the definition of personal data, as you know, is a lot broader. So yes, we're definitely keeping our eye on new laws and regulations that are defining personal information in new ways, like the GDPR, for example, the new European privacy regulation that's coming into effect in 2 years that has a broader definition of personal information than we see in the States. Because we're a global company, we need to look at all the different ways that personal information is defined, both under regulations, but also what are the customer expectations of what is encompassed in the definition of personal information. And I'm sure when you spoke to Jules, he talked about the paper that they've put out about de-identification, and he's got a great infographic which tries to kind of put in categories different types of data. And one of the principles, best practices within privacy and data management, of course, is data minimization. So to the extent that companies can get the benefits of customer data by using de-identified data sets, either to provide analytics or to provide the services, that's obviously safer. And there are different kind of controls on that type of data. So it's something that all technology companies have to be aware of, because as you're building out your privacy and security controls, you want to know where's your data, what type of data are you talking about, and what are the different types of controls that you place on that type of data.
You mentioned briefly about GDPR. Where do you see all that going? And now that the safe harbor is now no longer around, or how do you think companies are going to start to deal with, being able to do cross-border transfers? What's your view on that?
Right. Well, I mean, GDPR is bigger than just cross-border transfers. I mean, obviously, there's a lot that's part of GDPR in terms of the regulation itself. It's like a 200-page document or something. Yeah. My peers at other companies, we're all looking at it very closely, and we're identifying the priorities. So we're looking at timelines for implementing, new systems and processes within our organization, so that we can make sure that we're compliant with what we understand GDPR to require. There's a lot of uncertainty, I think, or ambiguities about how exactly the GDPR will be enforced. And so we're awaiting some additional guidance from the data processing authorities and other regulators, hopefully, to give us a little bit more color on how we might go about implementing different portions of the GDPR. So, for example, what exactly does consent mean, and how might we obtain consent from our users? What does data deletion, or the right to be forgotten, really mean in practice? Because for me, that's sort of the crux of it, is how do I translate the legal requirements into business requirements? So how do I go back to my team and my executives and my peers within the company who know that GDPR is out there, because obviously it's in the legal news. The privacy conferences all have topics about GDPR and what it is, and it's coming soon, and you have to get ready. But what it means in practice, it's a little bit like privacy by design, kind of on steroids. So what can we do as privacy programmatic advisors? How can we make sure that our companies are being forward-looking and not just looking at it as like a compliance requirement? It's an ongoing privacy programmatic maintenance that is sort of the new regime that we're all working under, because if you're a global company and you're managing the data of European users, you need to be compliant. So I look at it kind of in that broader scope.
Right. Well, do you think? How about specifically on the cross-border thing? Do you think where do you see that going? I mean, obviously about the privacy shield, sort of questions about that. I mean, how do you see companies sort of dealing with being able to do the cross-border transfer? There's no safe harbor.
It's difficult. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty, because safe harbor went away last October. And Privacy Shield still has a lot of uncertainty whether that's going to be approved and whether it's going to be upheld in terms of any legal challenges that we may see. So it's hard to say, really, in terms of what companies are doing and how we look at it from a planning perspective. I mean, there's obviously other methods of onward data transfer that are we're still being told are valid, whether they're model clauses or binding corporate rules or consent or some of the other derogations. But The peers that I'm speaking to, my privacy colleagues in the industry, we're all sort of in a wait and see mode with Privacy Shield because we're not quite sure what's going to happen, and we're sort of waiting for the final determination of Privacy Shield, and then see if any of big companies end up getting the Privacy Shield self-certification. So if we see a Facebook or a Google or a Microsoft obtaining their Privacy Shield certification, I think that will be a signal to other technology companies that, okay, Privacy Shield is maybe something that's worth looking into, either as the only form of onward data transfer or maybe as a supplemental form of data transfer. But companies may also have other methods, whether it's model clauses or BCRs in place. I think at this point it's too early to really tell. I wish I had my crystal ball. We're certainly keeping tabs on it. I'm following the news about it, but it's hard to kind of put all your eggs in that basket.
Now, you've been doing privacy for a pretty long time. You were telling me, I think, close to 15 years. And obviously, it's really exploded in the last few years. Do you see it kind of just, are we still in the exploding phase, or do you see some of it actually settling down? Give me a feel for sort of the arc of the privacy world since you've been doing it for quite a while.
Yeah, it's interesting. Privacy is now very much more mainstream than it was when I started my practice. I was an IP attorney at a firm, and then I was in-house at Walmart working with a large volume of data, as you can imagine, and started doing privacy pretty early in my career. And it's just kind of continued to grow as a niche within the legal profession. So I think it's still on the upward trajectory because I think there's a lot more settling down of the regulations. I think we'll see a lot of new privacy attorneys entering the field in the next couple of years because of GDPR and some of the other regulations where companies need to staff up, whether it's with their outside counsel or consultants or internal resources to be able to manage the privacy demands that we're seeing from a regulatory perspective. So I think it's going to continue on an upward trajectory for some period of time.
Yeah, it certainly seems like it's going to be a major compliance function now. That seems kind of inevitable for a lot more and more companies. I mean, especially with, as you said, the GDPR. I mean, it's like Sarbanes-Oxley, but not just for public companies anymore.
Right. Well, and I think there's also, not just the regulatory activity, but also we're seeing it more and more covered in the mainstream media. I mean, we're seeing, with Schrems and with Apple versus the FBI, we're seeing it much more of a social issue that we're seeing is more of the fabric of kind of our day-to-day conversations. So it's not only what's happening with laws and regulations, but we're seeing it touch on our daily lives and how we use technology. How do we manage the balance between privacy and security? So privacy is embedded in sort of the fabric of our lives now, not only those of us who work as privacy attorneys or privacy professionals, but I think everybody, they're thinking about privacy and technology in a different way now.
Well, you seem like you really enjoy the topic. You've been doing it for a long time. What is it about privacy that you like so much?
It's interesting. I definitely am passionate about the subject, and part of it is, sort of this philosophical affinity to it. It's just, to me, so engaging in terms of the concepts, privacy versus security, or privacy and how we manage technology, and the way that our social lives are changing because there's so much digital content as part of our lives, and we're using technology in such a different way now. So to me, it's kind of intellectually challenging and stimulating, which being an attorney who's been practicing for so many years, that's a good thing to still be engaged with the topic itself. And also because I'm still interested in it because it's still developing. It's still a relatively new area of the law. So for me, it's exciting to be part of a community of attorneys and privacy professionals and security engineers who were, we've known each other for some period of time, and we're sort of coming up in this era together. So that kind of community culture and that sort of new kind of entrepreneurial spirit is fun to be around and fun to be a part of.
You mentioned that it's nice to see privacy become more the mainstream. Do you think it's really sort of quote reached the mainstream, or has it still got a ways to go before it really becomes mainstream?
I think it still has a ways to go. I mean, I think it's certainly in the last 5 to 10 years, you've seen a lot more coverage about privacy topics in the news, but I think there's certainly a ways to go just in terms of how companies are dealing with privacy and security, how they're staffing their legal departments to handle these issues, and the general public's awareness about privacy. But I think it's certainly a much different type of environment that we've seen recently. So there's more awareness, but it's, I mean, mainstream, we live in a bit of a bubble here in Silicon Valley, so maybe it's mainstream for Silicon Valley, but maybe not mainstream across the country or across the globe. But maybe I should say becoming more mainstream.
Right. Well, do you see, or is it your sense that, I mean, for example, in your technology products, that you're seeing more consumer demand for privacy and controls that before consumers didn't really care that much? I mean, are you seeing that it's also fueling a lot of the company's response? I mean, I know they want to do the right thing in privacy and all that, but is it also really a consumer-driven demand also?
Yes. Well, you're seeing companies like Microsoft and Apple and others coming out, taking a particular stand on privacy, and they're using it for a particular reason to be as a market differentiator. So they're seeing the positive benefit of having that trust relationship with their customers. And I do think there is more customer demand for privacy, in part because especially the European customers who are data controllers, so enterprise companies in Europe who are licensing cloud products or licensing software products, they have an obligation to their end users, to their data subjects, to protect their data. So from a vendor management perspective, you're seeing a lot more dialogue with vendors to make sure that the privacy rights are being kind of the downstream protection of privacy rights is happening. So I definitely see it. I've seen it, when I worked at other companies, that the privacy comes up a lot more in your negotiations, either whether you're licensing your software or you're dealing with one of your vendors, with one of your sub-processors. It's, IP kind of used to be the big issue, or IP ownership or indemnification, and obviously we're still negotiating those terms, but there's also a lot more customer demand, but just customer awareness and more sophistication about these issues that I'm seeing more and more in the negotiation standpoint, where you'll see more standard terms related to privacy and data security issues that I haven't seen in the past.
Let's talk about your blog, Privacy Guru. Tell me when you started that, and how much time do you spend on that, and what is your main goal with that blog?
Yeah, so I started the Privacy Guru about 2.5 years ago, and it's a website and a blog, and I also have an ebook that I published earlier this year called Privacy for Humans. It was a way to express myself in a different way and connect with users. I was a theater major in undergrad, and so it was a way for me to be creative and entrepreneurial and express myself creatively in a way that was slightly different than the way that I expressed myself as a privacy attorney. So similar types of issues, but more consumer focused. So the Privacy Guru is a way for me to connect to everyday people and encourage them to have a sense of wonder and amazement at all the wonderful things that are happening in our technologically advanced world, but also to promote a sense of privacy awareness. So similar to what I do within my company, of privacy awareness to our team members, to the employees. I'm also a privacy champion or a privacy advocate, in the sense that I feel very strongly that privacy is a social issue. Privacy is a personal kind of ethical issue that we can all grapple with, and we all have our own understanding of what privacy means to us individually. So as the privacy guru, my mission is to start a conversation about privacy topics and do it in a way that's engaging and fun. I use a lot of images and memes, and I'm trying to be very pithy with the content that I'm providing. So it's not meant for privacy scholars or academics. I'm happy if they respond positively to it, but I'm really trying to get past the legalese and the fear factor of technology and the apathy about privacy, because I think a lot of times now people have just sort of given up and think, oh, we have no more privacy. It's not worth the effort. And there's no sense in me trying to protect my privacy. And in my opinion, I think that's somewhat of a that I don't think we're at a point yet where we need to concede that's where we are as a society. I think we're definitely at a tipping point where we're seeing there can be a groundswell of awareness. And what I hope and what I promote in my blog and in my ebook is that we can all incorporate really easy privacy practices in our daily life that can enable us to enjoy technology and use technology to benefit our lives, but also be a little bit more aware of what are the ramifications, to take responsibility, read the privacy policies, do the privacy settings if your service offers that. Use certain tools that can help you protect your privacy, and to just have a little bit more sense of understanding of the issue. So just to be a little bit more informed about privacy and how it affects your life.
Which way do you think the consumer trend is going, though? Do you think it's trending towards apathy, or is it trending towards more, privacy awareness and protection?
Well, if I have my way, it will tend away from apathy into more engagement and more empowerment. I mean, that's what I'm trying to accomplish with my message as the privacy guru, is empowering users to be able to protect their privacy, and also to encourage companies to develop their products in such a way that is keeping the consumer in mind and enabling the end users to use their products in a way that is protective of their privacy. So it's interesting. There's a lot of studies that have been published that demonstrate that users say they care about privacy, but when it comes down to actually reading a privacy policy or doing anything with their privacy settings, they get overwhelmed, or they don't take the time to do it. There's that kind of convenience factor where it's easier sometimes to just download an app that's free and looks bright and shiny without really taking the time to read the privacy policy or understand what kind of information that app might be collecting about you. So I understand that, and I understand that I'm coming at it from a different perspective because I have years of experience and facility with understanding these issues. But I do think that there's everyone has the capacity to understand kind of the fundamentals about privacy and security, and to at least avoid those things that maybe are dangerous, or maybe use their information in a way that is not a best practice, or shouldn't be their data should be protected in a better way. So I'm hoping, I'm a very optimistic person, but I'm hoping that we're not tending towards a society where we're completely apathetic about privacy issues. That would not be a society that I would like to live in.
Alexandra, it's been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about what you do at AutoDesk and also at Privacy Guru.
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
This is Richard Hsu and Alexandra Ross. Thanks.